Angels. Roy Cummings of the Tampa Tribune now joins us. Now our good pal covering the Bucs. And let's start with Mr. Aguayo here, because this was half, the reactions half, wow, this is ingenious, half head scratching. What are you doing in the second round?
Right.
You love this pick, don't you?
I do. I really do. And here's why. Look, obviously, kicker was a real problem for this team last year. You had Kyle Brins at one point who couldn't get the job done, had to go back and get Connor Barth after Patrick Murray got hurt. I think we added it up. There was probably 3, maybe even 4 games that they lost because of the kicker. And you can't just think short term here, Dan. You've got to think about, what does this do for the future of the team? This is a guy who, barring something unforeseen happen, could be this team's kicker for the next 15, maybe even 20 years.
That's Grammatica-esque in terms of team legacy. And it's not just field goals that we're interested in here. Dirk Cutter is excited about kickoffs with Aguayo.
Yeah, look, there's new kickoff rules. If you kick it off deep, you kick it out of the end zone, you're going to bring the ball back to the 25-yard line. It's about a 3% increase in the ability for teams starting at the 25 to score touchdowns or field goals. What you've got with this kicker in Roberto Aguayo is a guy who can kick it off deep if that's what you choose to do, or he can kick it off just short enough, Dan, to make the other team bring the ball out if your coverage units are good enough. So they've got those options now. That's something they didn't have either, because Connor Barth, let's not remember, he did a pretty good job kicking off last year, getting it deep, but he wasn't really able to, capable of controlling it the way Roberto Aguayo can.
Did teams miss on Noah Spence because of the failed drug test that ended his Ohio State career?
We'll see. He's going to have to stay clean. He's proven that he has been clean for the last, 18 months, maybe longer, 2 years perhaps. He's proven that. He's sent all the 20 drug tests that he's taken since he got kicked out of Ohio State to all the teams, showing that he's clean. But he's got to keep it up. Now, if he does that, yes, teams missed, and somebody will probably really regret the fact that they passed on him. I think this is one that the Bucs are really, really excited about. He was the best pure pass rusher in the draft. He could play either side, right end, left end. And if at some point you need him to play a little bit of linebacker, outside linebacker, he can do that too. He's very versatile, and he's really, he's really committed to proving to everybody that he can play football.
And real quickly, Roy, you had the Bucs predicted to pick Vernon Hargreaves. Is he on the field opening day that good, ready to make an impact?
No question about it. He and Brent Grimes will probably be the 2 corners on the outside. We'll find out what happens in the nickel spot, but they got a lot of depth there now, a lot of depth they didn't have. They got competition. Competition's always good.
All right, and we got another small school guy, Ryan Smith, North Carolina Central. I mean, is this a story in the making, you think? Or?
I think it is. He's an interesting kid. He was into criminal justice. He wanted to be a U.S. Marshal. He's about chasing down the bad guys.
That's like,
we'll see what happens.
Keith Tandy.
Yes.
The CSI.
And also along the lines of Keith Tandy, the Bucs are going to start him off at safety. So he's a bit of a hybrid.
Do not steal anything from the Bucs locker room. We're going to take a quick break and then go back up to Chicago.
Roy, let's get right to it. What do you think of the Smith hiring?
I love it. I'll tell you what, I would have interviewed Mike Smith for head coach's position, to be honest with you, just as the New York Giants did, just as the Miami Dolphins did, and rightfully so. This is a guy who's been around. I think when he was fired in Atlanta, there were a lot of people who were a little surprised by it. I was certainly surprised by it. I think he was the best head coach candidate out there of all the candidates that were available. So I think the Bucs got a bit of a coup here. He's a very good defensive coordinator. He's worked with Dirk Cutter. I'm not sure you could have a better marriage than these two guys coming back together again in this city.
Now, he was out of coaching last year, though. Is there any rust that needs to be shaken off, or do you think he can just jump right into this?
I think he can jump right in. I don't think this is like Lovie Smith. I think his defensive scheme is a little bit more up to date. It's not so much Tampa 2. It's going to be a 4-3 scheme. It'll be a one-gap scheme, much like what the players are playing now. It won't be that different. But he's a guy that jumps very well. He knows how to make the adjustments. He's never been fooled before, so he's been at this a while. He knows what he's doing. I think it's a really, really good hire.
Now, when we were talking yesterday, we're thinking 4-3. Still as the base defensive. How does that affect the draft? Where do they go?
Well, I don't think it affects the draft much at all. I still think that what you're doing there is you're looking for a defensive end. You're looking for cornerbacks. That's the way it was going into the offseason, even before Lovie Smith was fired. I think we knew exactly what the Bucs had to look for in the early rounds. Defensive end, both sides, left and right, and cornerbacks, both sides, left and right. So I don't think that changes. And who they end up picking, well, we'll wait until May to find out.
Dan Lucas and Roy Cummings at the Tampa Tribune met up after the game to discuss that defense and relive the final game-winning drive.
Roy Cummings, this is an old buck ball type game, a defensive dominance, offense scoring when it had to the most. Let's start with that final drive by the offense, because twice they threatened to get in the red zone. Jameis throws interceptions. Then they cap it when it mattered most. What were your impressions of that final drive?
Well, I like the way they didn't give up, and I think that's important for this team. Look, Jameis Winston is going to have giveaways. He's going to give the ball away. He's still a young quarterback. Even when he's been in the league for 8 or 9 or 10 years, he's still going to have mistakes. I mean, it's just part of the position, and you got to overcome them. And I think we saw a team today that had the wherewithal to overcome those mistakes. And, you got to absolutely love the fact that after he tries the Cam Newton thing again, I think maybe he's got to learn not to try to. He said he can't be Cam Newton, so don't start trying. He runs the bootleg. I just think, imaginative play calling. We saw it from the defense, too. As you said, it was old Buck Ball. I mean, Tony Dungy has got to be proud. 2 disciples today orchestrate an old-fashioned game of Buck Ball, and they used to win a lot of games this way here in this stadium.
However, on offense, until that final drive, did you sense it was an execution thing that was hurting this offense, or they just play calling perhaps? What was the reason for the slow offensive day? They couldn't even get near the 20-yard line of the Cowboys.
Well, you can't take away from the fact that you've got a pretty darn good defense over on the other side of the ball. The numbers may not indicate it. The numbers kind of say they're kind of mediocre, but they're a lot better than that. And I think the Bucs noticed that today and found out. The Bucs have been putting a lot of points on the board, and today that wasn't the case. But they found a way. And again, they were their own worst enemies at times. Mike Evans continues to have problems. He's got to continue to start to, improve his concentration. Jameis Winston, he's certainly one of those picks is on him. The one to Adam Humphries, way behind the receiver. Again, you've got to stick with it. On a day like today, when it's a one-score game and it's a very tight scoring game and there's a lot of defense being played, you just got to stick with it and hope that you can put together 1 or 2 good drives. Let's not forget, 3 of the last 3 drives and 4 of their last 5 started inside their own 15-yard line.
Moving forward, Roy, has Lovie Smith found his combination in the defensive backfield, or was that just a stellar effort today? Maybe a combination of both?
Probably a combination of both, but I think for the foreseeable future, you're going to see more Sterling Moore and Judah J. Barima there in the secondary at cornerback because they're performing. They're coming up with big plays. The safety play is getting better. Bradley McDougall comes back and does what he's been doing all year, which is making big tackles. Same with Chris Conte. I think the whole secondary play's improved a lot. Probably the biggest improvement in this defensive side of the ball over the last 2 or 3 weeks. I got to think right now you got to be very pleased with what you're getting out of those guys. You're going to stick with those guys and let them fail before you start making changes. So, yeah, I think they found some answers there.
Really, before this pick, outside of this area, I don't know how many football fans would be able to name many Buccaneers outside of Gerald McCoy.
It's true. Not only does he give them somebody that people recognize, but, the most important thing, obviously, is on the football field. You've got to have a quarterback in this league. That's why these players are so important. This is a quarterback-driven league. It's very important to have that guy, and now they've got one, and the Buccaneers believe he is a franchise quarterback. I believe the franchise quarterbacks develop over time. They usually become franchise quarterbacks when they won a Super Bowl. They've taken their team to the playoffs a couple of times. They don't just get hatched that way. But the Buccaneers believe that Jameis Winston has all of that to become a franchise quarterback, and then one day he'll lead this team to a championship.
And you attended the NFL Combine, too, and it was after the Combine where it really seemed like things were really, the momentum was really gaining for the Bucs to pick Winston. Does it sound like to you that those those in-person interviews that Winston had with the Bucs just really put him over the top?
Yeah, I think they made a decision well before the Combine that this was the best football player. Now, there was a lot of work to be done after that, but I think when they got to by the time they got to the Combine in Indianapolis, again, that was back in February. So they'd seen him live at the Rose Bowl, seen him live a couple of times. Jason Light had, Lovie Smith had, and then they got to know him a little bit. And once you got to know him and started the vetting process into the off-season issues, they just became more and more comfortable. So they made a decision early on that this was the best football player, the best quarterback on the field, and then they came to an agreement that they were comfortable, as were the Glazers and everyone else in the organization, comfortable making him sort of, quote-unquote, the face of the franchise.
Evaluate Winston from what you've seen. He can obviously win games in the clutch, but he threw a lot of interceptions last year.
Well, if I was a fan, I would think a little bit of a Ben Roethlisberger type. He's a big kid like that, and, he's going to grow, and he's probably going to grow into that size of a player. He's going to have that ability to basically shed all kinds of potential tacklers. He's going to be able to move around in the pocket. He's not an exceptional athlete. He's a good athlete. He's not going to run for 40 yards on a sprint. He's not going to break out of the pocket and start to run around a lot, but he's going to be able to break free of would-be tacklers. He's going to be able to get the ball downfield. Has a very good throwing arm. And you know what he's got? He throws a catchable ball, a very soft pass, even though he's able to rifle it. He's got all those abilities. And the best thing, Jason, he can go to a line right now, read a defense, figure it out, and he can do it in a snap.
All right, Roy, we appreciate your insight. Don't go anywhere. We'll be
Okay.
talking to you later here as well. Roy, that was the third preseason game, the so-called dress rehearsal. The last time we're going to see the Bucs starters play a lot this preseason. So how ready is this team, especially this offense, for week 1 against Carolina?
Well, they better be ready, Jason, because let's face it, they're not going to play a whole lot in this game coming up on Thursday against the Redskins. You might see a couple of starters out there, maybe an Alteron Werner, maybe Mike Jenkins, but that's on the defensive side, obviously. Offense, I don't know, maybe that offensive line gets a look. You know, they still need some work, I think. So that's a group that may get some time in this game. But other than that, I think they are ready. I mean, the thing that's interesting, and we had it yesterday, you know, at halftime here, Ronde Barber talking to Jeff Tedford about, you know, how much of this offense has been seen. And Jeff Tedford says, hey, you know what? We probably looked at maybe 20-30%. The rest we're practicing it, but we haven't shown it to anybody yet, so I think that's going to be real interesting.
Bucs made a few roster cuts today. They'll be making some moves after the next game against Washington. What are some of the position battles you're going to be watching as we come down to these final cuts?
Well, I think one of the more interesting ones is defensive end. There's a lot of real promising prospects there. The Bucs really like this kid Larry English, who they picked up off waivers a couple weeks ago. He's got a chance to make this team. He's also got a chance to maybe push Daquan Bowers off the team. We'll see if that happens. You know, the Bucs were pretty happy with what they saw of Daquan Bowers when he was playing, but he's had a hard time staying healthy, so I'm anxious to see what happens there.
All right, as for those Newton and Bradford injuries, those are the Bucs' first 2 opponents in the regular season. How much more winnable do those games become for the Bucs now that Newton may not play? Their Panthers are hopeful he will, but Bradford definitely isn't going to play.
Well, first of all, you're talking about the defending NFC South champions in Carolina. If they don't have their quarterback, they're really hurting, because that team right now, a lot of people don't think they're as good as they were a year ago. So you take Cam Newton out of the equation. If you take him out of the equation, all of a sudden they become an extremely beatable team. I think they're beatable now, especially the way the Bucs defense has been playing. As for St. Louis, look, a lot of people weren't real happy with Sam Bradford to begin with. So let's see how that works out. He's out for sure. They got to go to Sean Hill. Not much of a quarterback there. I mean, I got to think that over the next 2 weeks, they're going to start looking for some pieces. They're going to look at people that are being cut around the league. So we'll see what happens in St. Louis. But again, these become winnable games now. They were winnable to begin with. But the way the defense is playing, if you take those quarterbacks out of the equation or just take a little bit of the edge off of those two guys, boy, all of a sudden the Bucs got a big edge.
As for rookie Mike Evans this week, a TMZ video released that for some reason taken in March, supposedly released months later, but caught getting in a fight outside of a nightclub in Miami. Bucs say case closed. What do you think? Deal or no deal here?
A deal, because here's the thing. It happened in March. He wasn't even a Buccaneer. He wasn't even in the NFL at the time. This is, you know, anybody that hangs out in nightclubs, Jason, I know you're the kind, you know, you're going to have these arguments now and then certainly with bouncers and with security people. And if you look at the video, what I like most is the fact, you watch him hop this car in this thing, Jason. If this video had come out before the draft, I don't know if Mike Evans sticks around to the 7th pick overall. I'm thinking somebody takes him 4th, 5th overall, because the hops he shows on that, jumping over that car, man, that's some sweet moves right there.
And Roy, good job not getting caught on any TMZ cameras during your coverage up in Buffalo as well.
I tried.
All right, thank you once again for Roy Cummings for stopping by, and that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Sunday Sports Extra. Of course, the Bucs play the Redskins on Thursday in their final preseason game. You can watch it exclusively here on News Channel 8, your official Bucs station. Have a great week.